Hey guys, welcome back to Journey to You, a podcast where we discuss all things self-development. If you're new here, hello, welcome. I'm Jaden, I'm your host. I'm so glad you're here with us today. Today we're going to be talking about negative thinking and breaking the mental barriers that we have up in our head. And usually our brains are our worst enemy. And it can be really hard to break through those negative patterns to create new ones and live a happier life. But it is possible. I've done it. A few years ago, I really identified as a victim of life circumstances because I had anxiety, I was overweight, I was just living a unhealthy life. And it really is not as easy as just stopping one day. You really kind of need to understand how to break through the barriers that we put up throughout our life. So often the conditioning we have when we are younger causes us to have these negative beliefs and negative self-talk and negative thinking habits. But it definitely is possible to change that around, and that's what this episode is about. I wanted to start this episode just by talking about what negative thinking is. And I'll read the definition to you now. So, negative thoughts are cognitive distortions that focus primarily on pessimism and often exaggerate the negative aspects of a situation while ignoring the positive. And so many studies actually show that people with negative thinking habits are more likely to have anxiety and depression. And it makes sense as well, because if you have something like anxiety, you might have that kind of hardwired in your brain, and it might be harder to think positively than negatively. Some examples of negative thinking include catastrophizing. So if you often think of the worst case situation, that is really negative, because imagine if, say, your boss texts you and says, "Hey, can you give me a ring?" You might automatically think, I am fired, I am in so much trouble, I blah, 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 blah. And they might just be calling you to tell you that they want you to stay an extra hour on Tuesday, or that you've done a really good job and they've given you a pay rise. Like, anything is possible, but catastrophizing is really looking for that negative situation and making a mountain out of a pebble, basically. Another example of negative thinking, a negative thinking habit, is thinking only in black and white. So saying to yourself, if I am not succeeding, I'm failing. Or, well, I don't look like the person in the magazine, so I'm ugly. No, it's not necessarily one or the other all the time. Often it's to your own detriment and you're making yourself feel bad. When I say you listening to this, absorbing this information, you don't do this. I know if it was a choice, which it is, it's so hard to kind of explain, but your brain has these habits, and it's not your fault that your brain has these habits. It's the way that the human brain works. And the real you who's absorbing this information, the you that isn't on autopilot, you have the ability to intercept those thoughts and change them. Let's move on to the trap of self-imposed restrictions. So what I mean by that is the beliefs that you create that are limiting you. I'm sure you will have heard about limiting beliefs. It's basically you, for some reason, have absorbed these negative self-beliefs about yourself and your abilities and your capabilities, and that creates a barrier of what is and isn't possible. So maybe you wouldn't apply for a promotion because deep down you believe that you're not worthy of more than the amount of money you're on now. And these are often based off of fears or self-doubt or your conditioning of when you were growing up. Maybe they're not your beliefs, maybe they're beliefs that were passed on to you. Maybe you've had nothing but success in your career but you grew up in a household where money was very limited and someone was always talking about how, the rich are bad people and greedy. And so therefore you're not going to try to get more money because you've got these beliefs. And a study was actually done that found that people who are in bad life circumstances are less likely to try and get out. So if you feel like you're trapped and it's impossible to get out of a situation, you're less likely to click on this podcast episode and try to fix it. So if you've done that, you've taken the first step and you should be really proud of yourself. And it is possible to change your beliefs. If you change your beliefs, everything else will change. It's like the cognitive behavior therapy cycle of your thoughts become your actions and your actions confirm your beliefs, which create your thoughts. So if you applied for the promotion and you got it, then you might start believing that it is possible to create success and have money but not be a douchebag with it. And then you'll believe that you are capable and you are worthy of success, and then you're going to act in accordance with that and work really hard and get another promotion and do all these amazing things, whatever it is you want to do. Ask yourself right now, what in my situation do I want to change? And why hasn't it changed yet? What have you done to change that? Or is there some part of you that believes that you're not worthy of change? And then work on those beliefs, find out the cause and change them. The next thing that I would like to talk about is mental imprisonment. And what that is the sense of feeling trapped in your own mind. So this can often come from those negative beliefs and thought patterns and all these things that we've talked about so far in the episode. It can lead you to feeling really trapped in your brain and continues adding to that cycle that is so toxic. And something that comes from this feeling of imprisonment in your mind is chronic stress. And chronic stress is so bad for you. Like, yes, it'll have its mental and physical impacts, but especially for your brain function, chronic stress leads the hippocampus in your brain to freak out, basically, and it can impair your memory and your decision-making skills. Please try to remember that everything is okay. And if you're in a situation that you don't like, you can change the way you think about that situation. Some examples of feeling trapped would be if you're in a dead-end job that you don't like, you might feel really trapped and you might believe that there's no way out, and that will lead you to not work as hard and continue that cycle of feeling trapped because you're not going to get a promotion if you're not working hard. All these things, and it just is that cycle that continues. Or for example, you might be in a toxic relationship and you feel like if you leave, then that black and white thinking comes out. Well, if I'm not in a relationship, then I'm going to be lonely, which is not true at all. That's just that black and white thinking. That will lead you to feel trapped in a relationship that you don't want to be in. And I've been there. That is not a good place to be. Sometimes being courageous and being brave feels like you are going to die and your tummy is going to fall out of you, but it won't. You will be okay, and there is always hope. And break free. Like, if your brain is causing you to feel this way, prove it wrong. You are capable of finding a relationship where you're happy. You are capable of finding a job where you're happy. You are capable of so much, and if at the moment you don't have the proof that shows otherwise, create it. I'm sure there have been other people in the situation you're in now who've gotten through it and gotten to the other side and have lived a happier, healthier life because of it. Okay, so we've discussed what negative thinking looks like, why we're conditioned to think that way, why it's bad. Let's go into a bit more depth about how to actually stop it, how to break free of your mind and those mental barriers. So first, let's discuss some ways to counter the negative thoughts that pop up. So the first thing is mindfulness. And if you haven't already, you need to read The Power of Now. And it's all about mindfulness. It's about being present, and not in a meditation-y way, just in a way of realizing that the past is gone, it's done. So there's no point to have those negative emotions like judgment or regret or embarrassment, and the future hasn't even happened yet. So there's no point feeling the emotions like worry and anxiety and stress. When you are in the present moment, you can deal with whatever is in front of you, and you can be really mindful and learn to sit and listen to your thoughts and be able to recognize those negative thoughts that pop up and be able to look at them without judgment or identifying with them. So maybe just start by doing some guided meditations, but if you've done those before and you know how to be present, what I do to really get in that mindset to just calm down if I'm in a place where I need to is I just pause and take some deep breaths, and then I look around, I see what I can see, I feel on my body what I can feel, I smell if I can smell something, and then the next step after being aware is kind of pausing your thoughts. And this is what some people think is impossible, but with practice, it is possible. I've done it. It's a bit tricky, but The Power of Now talks all about it and is really good to, if you're interested, definitely give it a read. But basically, I pause and pretend that the part of me who is listening to the thoughts is kind of just hiding in the corner and looking out for them, like seeing what pops up and then going, okay, that's interesting that my brain thought that. Move on. You know, it's kind of similar to another meditation technique, which is noting. So laying down with your eyes closed, counting your breaths in and out 1 to 10. And then when you notice a thought pop up, instead of identifying as that thought or falling into that loop, just recognizing, okay, I just had a thought, and pretend you're dusting it off with a little feather, and then continue the counting. That's actually a really good way to go to sleep if you're an overthinker as well. The next thing that would be good to counter negative thoughts is cognitive restructuring. So that's similar to what we discussed at the start of the episode, where you imagine your thoughts create your actions create your beliefs, and so on and so forth. But you can interject into that cycle and implant new thoughts. So think about you're in a relationship and you don't want to leave because you don't want to be lonely. You're probably going to recognize that when it's in the process of being a thought, because beliefs just kind of sit there. But when you're thinking about it before you act, try to implant a new belief that you want to believe, a new thought that's really intentional. So perhaps you could try saying to yourself, if I were to leave, I might have more time to try new hobbies and make new friends. Or if I was single, then I might have the opportunity to meet more people because I might download dating apps, those kinds of things. So try to really intentionally implant new thoughts and interrupt that cycle. And that cycle thing was something I learned in therapy a long time ago, and it really does work. And it just comes with a bit of mindfulness, because you need to be able to recognize the thoughts as they pop up. But it's definitely possible and a good way to counter those negative thoughts or make them disappear. Because with practice, those new thoughts will become your new beliefs, and that will become your new automatic thought. Now let's talk about ways that we can challenge self-imposed restrictions. Start making small goals of things that you can do to prove that belief wrong. So for example, maybe instead of breaking up with your partner because you're worried about being alone, have some nights away from them and realize that it's not too scary. And then move up to having some tricky conversations with them and maybe breaking up with them. Or at work, instead of just feeling like you're in a dead-end job, talk to your manager about, don't say you feel like you're in a dead-end job, but maybe talk about future growth opportunities and what you need to work on, and then work on those small things. And it's so easy to make that switch and start proving to yourself little by little that the restrictions you put on yourself may not be true. And my partner actually talks about this. Fear is false evidence appearing real. So if you're scared, find that false evidence and do that by trial and error. Pretend you're a scientist. Just use these next few weeks as a little experiment. How far can you go? How far can you push yourself? What can you achieve? Another way that is really common and popular is positive affirmations. And these are really helpful as well. The only thing with these is your brain ignores the things that it sees really frequently. So for example, when you walk into your room, you would have a panic attack if you walked into every room and had to notice each and everything that's surrounding you at a time, because there's so much going on all the time. So your brain has a bit of a bias where it will only focus on the things that it feels like it needs to focus on. So the reason I say this is because if you're writing little affirmations such as I love myself, or I'm capable of X, Y, and Z, and you're putting it in one spot, the first week it's going to be great and you're going to look at that sticky note and go, yeah, I am, rah, rah, rah. But make sure to move them around, because after a while your brain will just go, oh, that's where that sticky note is. Do you know what I mean? So same with setting alarms on your phone. I do this at work. People get a little bit annoyed when they go off. But set them for different times. So change the times that they go off. Otherwise, eventually you'll just say, oh, that's the 11:30 alarm. And you may not read what the alarm is saying at the top when it goes off on your phone. So now let's talk about some ways to escape that mental imprisonment feeling. The first thing for this feeling is self-awareness. So by that, I mean recognize the thoughts that you're feeling trapped in. So for example, you have a group of friends and you don't like one of the girls that is in the group of friends, and you feel really trapped because you feel like you can't go out with your friends without her being there, and you really dislike her and she's mean and you just don't get along. She's awkward and you feel awkward when you're around her, and it feels icky. You might feel really trapped, and being able to be self-aware and realize, why do I feel trapped? What is contributing to this feeling of being trapped? Why do I feel like I can't go out with my friends with other people? Is it because I don't want to upset Becky because I'm a people pleaser? Okay, let's dive more into that. Where does that come from? Being really self-aware, and, journaling is a really great way to do that. I do not, a lot of people say that you don't need to journal, but I've talked about this on other episodes as well. I heard this great, analogy about, if I asked you, what's 12 times 6, take 7 plus 9 divided by 2 times 3, unless you're a genius, you might say, wait a second, let me just get a piece of paper and write it down. And if you have a piece of paper, you might be able to work it out. But in your head, you've got all these numbers floating around. It's just a lot. And the same goes for your thinking. So if you are feeling really trapped and there's so much going on, write it down, let it out that way, and work it out. Sometimes even just letting it out helps. And then you can come up with a plan of how you're going to handle the situation that you're in. You know why you feel this way now, and let's talk about how you can get yourself out of this situation. And you can just do that in your journal, or you can discuss it with maybe someone who's not in the friendship group, or a trusted friend or family member who you can discuss these things with without fear of judgment. But you definitely can do it by yourself as well. And lastly, let's talk about some ways to get out of that victim mindset. So the first thing we briefly discussed when we were talking about it was accountability. Make sure that you take responsibility for the way that you behave. If you've upset someone, it can be really scary to admit fault. And you might feel like if you admit fault, you're admitting a weakness and all these things, but no, you're just taking accountability, and people will most likely respect that as well. I know if I told someone that I wasn't too happy with something that they did, I would respond worse if they didn't take any responsibility or accountability with that. And I would respond a lot better if they apologized. I'd be like, oh, it's totally fine. Let's move on from this. The next thing, again, is positive affirmations. So telling yourself that you are more than your anxiety. You are more than a victim of the situation that you are or were in. You are worthy. You are lovable. You are all these amazing things, and I'm sure you are. And you maybe need to get that reassurance from yourself as well, because if you aren't going to believe it, you're not going to believe it when someone else says it. So make sure to give those positive affirmations to yourself and speak kindly to yourself. Lastly, as well as just those goal setting, I should say. So being in a victim mindset is, really any of these things, like it can feel like you're buried at the bottom of a hole and there's no way of getting out. But setting those small goals to slowly improve, it will work. You will eventually see change. And whether that's, today, if someone says to me that I've upset them, instead of getting defensive, I'm going to take a few deep breaths and look at this situation from their point of view and apologize for anything that I can apologize for, or take responsibility for something that I might have done wrong, or not even, you don't need to have done anything wrong to be able to take accountability. You can take accountability for something that just didn't go as planned, and that's okay. There's no need to blame other people for that. Alrighty, well, thank you so much for listening to this episode and having me with you today. I hope that you are able to take some things away from this episode, and even if it is just hope that things are going to be okay. There's always a challenge, and there's always something to work on, something to improve. And imagine how boring life would be if you had nothing to work on or work towards. If you are someone who likes self-development and likes listening to these kinds of episodes, this is the podcast for you. Make sure to follow along. Try to listen to your thoughts today and identify one limiting belief, and then tell yourself the opposite. So maybe you will listen to this and go, well, I'm not capable of listening to my thoughts. That's a limiting belief. So start there. But yeah, please, if this has resonated with you and you have any other tips, let me know. I'll list the social media below that you can contact me on, or you can even just comment on a Instagram post, those kinds of things. I love hearing from you guys if you want to send me a DM as well. And yeah, make sure to rate the podcast. It really helps other people find the podcast. And yeah, I will leave that with you. I hope you have an amazing rest of the day. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.